All right, it's good to see everybody here today. Thankful that the Lord has blessed and allowed us to be able to come together again. I enjoyed being with you guys. We've had some sickness, of course, and we've kind of been, one or the other has been out, it seems like. Just a lot of different things going on. But I mentioned this morning it was nice to be able to come back together. And not just to be here, but be able to actually sing full-blown hymns. Seems like there for a couple services we were singing choruses because that's all we could get squeaked out. But the Lord has provided healing, and we're thankful for that. We are going to get back into the book of Proverbs again today. In the mornings, of course, we've been going through the book of Romans, and we got about 11 verses into Romans chapter 8, and we'll pick up with there, Lord willing. We'll pick up with that on Sunday, next Sunday. But today, we are going to be back in the book of Proverbs. You know, we kind of hit a bunch of these verses the other day, and it's really neat when you look at these. I mean, the book of Proverbs is just so picturesque, right? We talked about as smoke to the eyes, so is the sluggard to them that send him. Or whoso boasteth a false gift is like clouds and wind without rain. Or confidence in an unfaithful man in the time of trouble is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint. Just that picture of, you take somebody that's unfaithful and they're not likely to do what they've been set out to do and they've proven over and over again or whatever, right? But you send somebody out like that with an important message. It's like when you go to bite into something and you got that broken tooth and, oh man, the pain just shoots through you. You think you're okay, but man, then that shooting, stabbing pain. Or you think you're good and you go to walk and you just put pressure on that broken ankle, that sprained ankle, and boom, right? That's what it's like when you put your faith in an unfaithful person. We spent some time talking about having a good name and how important that is, right? Proverbs tells us that is greatly to be desired, having a good name. And we went in and we talked about what some of that means. We also talked a little bit about what the opposite of that is, and how there's so many pictures in the book of Proverbs that show us how to not have a good name, right? And so we spent some time talking about those examples. And where we're at today is the book of Proverbs, chapter 27. We're going to read 2 verses. And then we want to talk about this concept of the wounds of a friend. Okay, the wounds of a friend. Proverbs chapter 27, verse 5 and verse 6. Open rebuke is better than secret love, and faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. There's a couple different thoughts there. We're going to spend most of our time on verse 6. But this idea of open rebuke is better than secret love. And I want to start there as we lead into this whole concept of faithful are the wounds of a friend. You know, there are times when what is needed is open rebuke. And now, listen, I'm not saying that I need to find the most public place and I'm going to openly rebuke you in front of many people as I can. I don't think that's what that's talking about, but that idea of straightforward, clear and plain rebuke. This is what is needed versus secret love. I love you, but I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to just stand off and let whatever happens, happens. Open rebuke, when needed, is better than the secret love that I have for you that's never going to display itself, never going to show itself. With that in mind, think about this concept in the verse right after it. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. I think the first thing that we need to talk about is what kind of wounds are we talking about? Okay? Listen, it is fully possible for me as your friend to do something stupid and offensive that causes wounds. I don't know that that's what this verse is talking about. There are other verses that deal with that situation. Forgiveness, grace, mercy, or even how you go about dealing with that, especially in the New Testament, right? As saved brothers and sisters in Christ, if there's an offense, there is a way and a place and an order in which you can do that. And there are places in the Scripture that deal with that. I personally don't think, based on the context and some other things in this chapter, I don't think this is talking necessarily about that, because especially since it talks about faithful are the wounds of a friend. So I think it's important to understand what wounds are we talking about. Again, not necessarily talking about the times where I do something foolish and I really do wound you and have an offense. There's ways the Bible talks about that we can work that out. I believe what this is talking about, we'll get into more detail in a second. This is talking about the situations where a friend, in care for you and desire to see things be okay for you, says some things that may wound you. They're true, they're necessary, they're needed, they may hurt. They're not going to be comfortable. They may not feel like it's help at first because they are painful. But the Bible says that the wounds of a friend, faithful are the wounds of a friend. Now, one thing I think you need to understand about this, when you look up that word faithful, the thought behind that word is building up, or to build up, is part of what that context can mean. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. The times and the situations where what I say or what somebody says to me hurts. It may even cut kind of deep. But it's said and meant in a way that is supposed to build me up. It's supposed to help me. You know, sometimes life really is, sometimes the painful things in life are the things we learn the most from. Be careful. And I'll get to both sides of this question in a second. Be careful how you react when somebody comes to you. Again, we're not talking about some of those people in the prior chapters. The unfaithful person, the person you shouldn't be putting confidence in, the fool. We are talking about be careful when a friend, a proven faithful friend, comes to you with some challenges for you. Be careful how you react to that. Understand that many times that is done in a place of love and caring and compassion and wanting the best for you. Like I said, I will get into the other side of that in a minute. I'm not going to turn there, but there are passages in Proverbs especially that deal with how a fool reacts to rebuke or guidance, and how somebody that's wise reacts to those things. So we need to be careful. Understand that it is sometimes the sharp words, the things that we don't want to hear, are the things that we need to hear. I'd love to stand up here and tell you that this is all about me as the preacher and the pastor. I get to say these things. You know what? It goes both ways. There may be times where you need to say some things to me. How am I reacting? How am I handling it? And I need to remember that sometimes faithful are the wounds of a friend. You know, we don't like to be rebuked. I think I'm fairly safe in saying that for about anybody. I think human nature has this built-in defensive mechanism. Oh, you can't say that about me. Well, what do you know? Mind your own business. Oh, that got him. You can't talk to me like that. I thought you were my friend. Those are the reactions that we often have, right, when people come to us with some challenges for us. Now again, before you get too far, remember, here in a little bit I'm going to talk about if you're the one coming to somebody, there's a whole set of guiding principles there too. Do you react wisely to the rebuke that's given to you? It's important, and this will help you. This, I think, will help you be able to handle that rebuke when you realize that sometimes the wounds of a friend are meant to actually build you up. They are meant to encourage, strengthen, and help. So the context of these verses indicates that that's what we're talking about here. It hurts to be rebuked. But sometimes that straightforward statement, that friend that says what nobody else wants to say, is exactly what you need to hear. Listen, there have been times when I know something needed to be said, but I didn't want to be offensive. I didn't want to be embarrassed. I didn't want anybody getting angry at me. I didn't want... Are you starting to notice a theme here? I. There are times when I need to be willing to get over my own struggles with what needs to be said because it is best for that person to hear. Many times we don't say it because, and we think it's about them because it's like, well, I don't want them to be angry at me. Well, okay, I get that. But again, what's the focus of that? The focus of that is that they're going to be angry at you. Which makes it about who? Them or you? Sometimes there's things that need to be said. I want you to think about this, though, because in the last half of this verse, it says, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. You know, it's interesting to me. You look at these two different things, and they are so opposite. And it's interesting how life can be sometimes, because this is describing a situation where the one who should be your friend, the one that you lean on, the one that you confide in, the one that you consider your brother, your sister. Well, man, what they're saying is hurtful. But this one over here is coaxing, and considerate, and buddying up to you, and the kisses of a friend. I don't think this is meant in the context of a romantic type kiss. This is that flattery. This is that show of companionship and closeness. Be careful, because sometimes that right there, that's actually the enemy. Be careful when somebody who has a bad reputation, who's been unfaithful in the past, somebody that is known to be harmful and hurtful and inappropriate, maybe even runs with the wrong crowd, historically has been opposed to you and pushing against you, be careful when suddenly that person is buddy-buddy, kissy-kissy. What are you saying? I'm saying that sometimes, you say it a half dozen different ways, Can't read a book by its cover. Sometimes what's on the surface is not really what's underneath. In this verse, the one that has said something hurtful is actually the friend, and the person that has been cuddled up close is actually the enemy. You ever seen it where sometimes, maybe even you really know it? I think most of the time we do. But you really know you're not doing what you're supposed to do. And there's that guy that's like, it's fine, it's okay. You know, your scenario is different. Yeah, normally you shouldn't be doing that, but it's okay. It's just temporary. Or, yeah, it's probably not as bad as it sounds. It'll be okay. Versus the one that says, look, this is bad. This is in direct contradiction to what God has told us as we as Christians should be doing. I love you, and you need to not be doing this. Which one of those is our friend? Do you know? I want you to remember something. Turn over to back one chapter to Proverbs chapter 26. These are some verses we've already covered. Verse 24 and 25. He that hateth disassembleth, teareth down with his lips, and layeth up deceit within him. When he speaketh fair, believe him not, for there are 7 abominations in his heart. Remember, be careful when the one who is known to be wicked and not what they're supposed to be suddenly is ooey gooey. Be ready, because in their heart there may be 7 abominations waiting for the opportunity to come. I also think about the verses that indicate that, it's the person that's not doing what they're supposed to do that wants others to join them. Right? That's a principle in the Bible you'll find too, is that people that are off in sin, not doing what they want others to join them. And they will be encouraging. And they will be, hey, it's good, we'll be okay. Makes them feel better about what they're doing. Makes them stand out less that they're off where they're not supposed to be. Be careful. Be very careful. Now, listen, I also want to say here, I'm just prefacing this. If you've had problems with somebody in the past, and they're actually putting out the olive branch, that sign of peace, listen, I'm not telling you, look, every time that you've ever had a problem with somebody in the past, you just got to just shut it down. Never touch them, never be around them, never do. I'm not saying that. Because I think sometimes we can miss an opportunity to show love, compassion, forgiveness, and then rebuild and rekindle a friendship or something, or maybe a friendship that hasn't been there, and make new friends. So I'm not telling you just every time somebody that you've had a problem with in the past brings an olive branch of peace, shoot them down. That's not what I'm saying. But I am giving you a warning that not everything that's on the surface is what's really true motivator behind it. Sometimes what looks like love is hate. And sometimes what looks like anger or hate is love. So, well, now I'm confused. Spend time in the Word. Spend time in prayer. Be aware and ask the Lord to help you and to guide you. And make sure that you're living your life and basing your decisions and the way you treat others off of God's Word. That right there will help you a whole lot navigate this stuff. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. I want you to also look at Proverbs chapter 27, verse 17. I think about this verse a little bit when I think about the wounds of a friend. It says, iron sharpeneth iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. I think this verse is very fitting to that. Iron sharpeneth iron, right? And so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. Now, a few of you are maybe you're old enough to have a knife, but I don't know if you're old enough to sharpen your own knife. But if you've ever seen anybody sharpen a knife, lots of times they'll take that blade, that steel blade, and they'll run it across what's called a sharpening stone. It's hard. It's made out of, lots of times, different kinds of metals. And you actually sharpen this thing with something that's also hard. You know what it's actually doing? That repeated rubbing of that on that stone actually shaves off pieces of that metal, and it hones it down to a nice, sharp, crisp, clear blade. You don't sharpen that knife with a pillow. No. You don't sharpen that knife with a feather. No. You don't even sharpen that knife with wood. You actually have to sharpen that knife with something that knife can't cut, which is something very much like it. And you work at it. And technically speaking, if that was you, that would be painful. Because you're actually cutting away a little bit. It's very similar to some degree what the Lord does to us when we talked about John 10, where He's pruning things, right? He's cleaning. He's cutting away the garbage. It's very similar, right? Well, you know what? Me and you, as friends, we can challenge each other. We can commune with each other. It's not always a challenge. Look, our friendship's not going to be much of a friendship if every time we have a conversation, it's a challenge. My job is not every time that I talk to you to say something that I think you need to make better. Iron sharpening iron is not all, it's not just about that. There is an aspect of that. But listen, I can be an encouragement to you and you can be an encouragement to me. I can learn from you and you can learn from me. I can challenge you and you can challenge me back. And as we grow together and we work together and we work through issues together, you help me with an issue, I help you with an issue, we're kind of sharpening that stone, right? So a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. The point and the goal of this is that we're growing together, right? We help each other. We help each other. As we talk to each other and we challenge each other, we grow. If every time that we came together, you just agreed with everything I said, no matter what it was, you're not challenging me. You're not helping me to grow. You know what? As a leader, at my job as a leader, sometimes part of my job, I have a couple. My job is to encourage, right? I got to help people celebrate the wins. I got to help people find those things that are working well and keep doing those. But you know, part of my job too is to find those things that need to be changed and to tweak. It's called, in the business world, it's the nice way of saying it is constructive criticism. It's not a fun thing to do. It's really not. And if it's done the wrong way, it's actually quite devastating. But left undone, it can be quite devastating too. Because if I am doing a bunch of stuff and you as my friend just simply agree with me, or even just don't say anything, silence in most people's mind means that you don't have an issue with it. That's not helping me. I would actually go the other way too and say, look, as a supervisor, as a boss, as a leader, I want people to do the same to me. If I am leading in a way that's causing a lot of issues, I need those people that are willing to come to me, not easy, and say, hey, look, I know you're trying to help, but this isn't helping. What is that? That's picturing that concept of iron sharpeneth iron. That's what friends should be. That's how friends should be to each other. Iron sharpeneth iron. A couple thoughts here, and we're not going to turn here. I think you guys all know these stories good enough that I'll give you a couple examples. I'm going to give you one example of friends who did not handle this concept the right way. And I'm going to give you an example of one that did. Both of these were uncomfortable conversations that needed to be had. One of them, you walk away going, friends? Really? Maybe not. I bet you guys already know who I'm talking about. How about Job and his friends? His faithful friends. I add the word faithful there. You guys know the story of Job? What happened to Job? Job was a faithful man of God. He was faithful. He was very prosperous. And Satan told God, if you take away his health, if you take away his family, if you take away this, he won't serve you. And God removed his restraining hand, and some things happened to Job. Job's friends come to him at a time when he is in deep anguish, both physically and mentally. Set spiritual things aside, you could say at this point in his life, Job was a man who had been destroyed. He'd been torn down. He was at rock bottom. And if you don't know the story, let me tell you why I can say that. All of his kids had been killed. All of his wealth had been ruined and stolen and taken away. His wife's advice to him was to curse God so he could just die and be done with it. His health, he was covered in wounds and just sat with an old piece of clay pot and scraped his skin. Health was gone, wealth was gone, family was gone. And in that point in time, in walks Job's friends. And to some degree, they may have actually started out not too bad. It says that when they got there, they recognized the anguish that he was in, and they literally just sat with him. You know, sometimes that's the best you can do. Sometimes, just be there. We always think that we have to be there and to open our mouth, that we can't be a help, that we can't do anything if our mouth isn't moving. You know, sometimes what people need, they just need you there. Not always. Sometimes they need you to say something. Sometimes they just need your presence. And for a while, that's what they did with Job. But then the silence got to them. And then what they started doing was they started saying all of the things that they thought were causing Job's problems. And do you know what they had become convinced of? And this is where your doctrine can mess up the decisions that you make. They had come to the strict conclusion that there is no way somebody could suffer the things that Job suffered unless he had sinned against God. Surely that is the only way somebody could be suffering the things that Job is saying. So they went down this path of, well, Job, if you just get it right with God. Job, if you would just admit what it is that you've done that you shouldn't have done. This man just lost all his family and his wealth and his health, and he's sitting here like a beggar, a diseased beggar. And your advice is, well, if you'll just admit that you're a sinner, Job, it'll all be okay. And when Job conveys to them, I got nothing, guys. They pushed back, and they pushed back, and they pushed back, and they pushed back, and they pushed back. You know what ended up happening in this story? God rebuked the three friends and said, you better hope Job prays for you. Now, I will say that by the end of it, Job was rebuked himself too, a little bit, by God. Maybe his friends pushed him into that state. I don't know. But I think this is a good example of we as friends. Man, I'll tell you what, it's hard. And it takes some discernment. And whatever you do, you need to go into it thoughtfully and with a lot of prayer. Because sometimes you can open your mouth to be the one that's delivering the wounds, and that ends up being all it is. Because you're wrong. I'm not saying that those people weren't really Job's friends, but they were wrong. You say, well, how do you know they were wrong? Because God pretty soundly rebuked them. You say, well, then maybe our best bet is just to never say anything. Maybe what we should do is we should just keep our mouth shut anytime it comes to our friends and whether they're doing what's right or what's wrong. We just need to keep our mouth shut. Maybe that's best. Well, you know, there's another story that comes to mind, and this one may not be as obvious as the other one. I think about Esther. Esther was in a position of power. Maybe power is the wrong word. The king held all the power. But Esther was in definitely a place of honor and a place where she had been positioned to be able to petition the king. And what happened? Somebody that hated her people convinced the king to pass this law and have all of the Jews killed. That was his motive. But there was a family member of Esther's, somebody she cared deeply about and who had shown his love and compassion for her through the years. And he sent a message to her, conveyed to her what had happened, asking her to go into the king. And her response was, "Are you kidding?" I'm paraphrasing, obviously, guys. You're not going to find that, obviously, in the book of Esther. But in essence, this is kind of what happened. You're kidding, right? I mean, you know that anybody that goes into the king without being asked, he can just have them killed for no other reason other than they showed up uninvited. Right? You know that, right? And you want me to go in there? I haven't been asked. You're kidding. Right? I mean, I get it. I know there's this horrible law. I know that all of my people are in danger. But seriously, you want me to go to the king? You know, what could his answer have been? Well, you know what? I love you. You're my family. You're my friend. I don't want to put you in danger. You're right. You're in a position of safety. The rest of us, we're in danger. You could keep doing what you're doing and not be found out. I'll find another way. As your friend, I don't want to do that to you. Well, that could have been his answer, but it wasn't. You know what he told her? He said, you know what? He said, it's possible that you have been put where you are by God for just this exact time. And you know something else? You can sit there and try to hide in the comfort of the place that you've been put. And if you do that, God will deliver His people from somewhere, but you will still suffer the consequences of not doing what God put you there to do. Now, which one of those actually sounds like what a lot of the world would define as a friend? He didn't come back and say, I know it's putting you in danger, and as your friend, I can't ask you to do that. He said, no, he said, God put you where you are more than likely to do exactly what I'm asking you to do. You need to stop being selfish, and you need to do what God told you to do. Whoa. Listen, he may have not said those exact words, but that's basically what he said. He said, you can sit there in your nice, pretty, comfy place and hope this all blows over. I'm telling you, God's people will be delivered. You won't be. Which ones of those were the wounds of a faithful friend? Job's friends or Esther's? Sometimes we need to hear the things we don't want to hear. Sometimes we need to hear the things we don't want to hear. Now, as we close, I want to close with these two thoughts. And there's multiple verses I could go to, but this one was on my mind the other day, so this is the one we'll use. 2 Timothy chapter 2. This is where Timothy has been told that part of his role and responsibility is to be going out and to be declaring. And he's supposed to be reproving and rebuking. Right? He's supposed to be reproving and rebuking people. But this is what he says in verse 24. And the servant of the Lord must not strive, but be gentle unto all men, apt to teach, patient, in meekness, instructing those that oppose themselves, if God peradventure will give them repentance to the acknowledging of the truth. I want you to notice that word, in meekness. We're talking now about the friend side of this. Okay? We've talked about you as the one being rebuked, or you as the one being advised, you as the one feeling like these words are hurtful, how you need to react, and the situations that involve that. But listen, let's flip that around now. The person that's supposed to do the rebuking, even this preacher that's been, you think about his message, if you understand the rest of 2 Timothy, some of his message to people would not have been real nice to hear. But he is told you need to do it in meekness. Humble. Humble. The way I said what happened to Esther was like no holds barred. Well, her friend said it a little nicer than that. Still what he said. But I think even when you go back and read Esther, there's still a meekness there in that man when you look at it. You think about the way we approach somebody, the heart and attitude behind what we say, the way we say it, the why we say it. I think sometimes if we have the why correct, our attitude will actually be pretty good. Well, I'm saying it. It's a good reason why. I'm saying it because they're wrong. Well, if that's your attitude, you're probably not going to come at it with a meek heart and attitude, right? Now, if your reasoning is, I don't want to see them hurt, and I know where this leads because I've been there myself, or I've seen this happen to people and it's painful, I don't want them to go through that. You know what? Two totally different hearts and attitude there. We need to make sure that as we do this, and as we try to be the iron that sharpens iron, or the faithful friend, the wounds of a faithful friend, that we're doing this for the right reasons, with the right heart and the right attitude. I also want you to read, and we'll read this verse as we close here, back in Proverbs chapter 27. So the same chapter, Proverbs chapter 27. Just a few verses down, verse 9 says this, "Ointment and perfume rejoice the heart." Ointment, a soothing ointment, and perfume rejoice the heart. There's a sweetness and a comfort to those things. And sometimes it's those things like that that can, man, it just makes you feel better. This may be a goofy example, but I'm going to do it anyways. If you have ever been to a rustic church camp and you're hot and you're sweaty and you've spent a whole week not smelling good, and then you get home and you actually get to put on clothes that have not been at camp for a week, and a shower with, nice Old Spice, soap or whatever your choice of soap is. It's amazing how something like that can just feels so wonderful, right? It's kind of what this verse is talking about. The ointment and the perfume rejoice the heart. Listen to the last half of this verse. "So doth the sweetness of a man's friend by hearty counsel." Few verses apart, faithful are the wounds of a friend. But don't forget, the sweetness of a man's friend by hearty counsel. It rejoices the heart. Back to what I said a minute ago. If all I'm ever doing is challenging you in every conversation we have, probably not going to be good for our relationship. Probably doesn't have the right heart behind what I'm doing. As much as I'm encouraging you to understand sometimes the hard things have to be said, I need to be willing to say them. I need to be able to and willing to hear them. Use discernment in when you do it, how you do it, why you do it. And also remember to be there, to be the one that rejoices the heart, like the perfume and the ointment. Sometimes what you need is not me to challenge you. You need me to sit down beside you and have a good, sweet, kind, hearty session together. Just a few verses away, talking about the wounds that we sometimes inflict, talks about the ointments. It's almost an idea of a healing and a salve, right? Ointment and perfume rejoice the heart, so doth the sweetness of a man's friend by hearty counsel. I don't know, you may not walk away from this having any more answers than when you came. I can't always help you to know when is the right time to give a challenge versus being more like a healing ointment. But this I know, the Bible declares that a friend is both. A friend will sometimes cause the wounds because that's what's best for you. And sometimes they will be the ones that sit down and help provide the soothing ointment that rejoices the heart. It takes a lot of prayer, a lot of discernment. Understand that there's some verses that talk about being too hasty. Probably a good applicable application here. Don't rush into it. prayer, and make sure you go with the right heart and the right attitude. We can be a great encouragement to each other. We can also be like Job's friends and make it even worse. So be careful. Okay? All right. Brother Philip, would you come and lead us in a song, please? As Brother Philip comes, let's go ahead.